This is Conversation 11. It primarily focuses on Bob's involvement with the Chinese mob here in the U.S., as well as a trip to Hong Kong. As you recall, at the end of episode 10, Bob is introduced to the Chinese mafia by Alderman Roti. Pat Marcy's hovering in the background, and Bob's touch point is a young enforcer named Lenny Chow. Here we go, Conversation 11.
He was well known all throughout the country as one of their top enforcers. He was a young kid. He was only about 17, 18. He was a very young kid. But when they had gone to Boston, because they had the same problem there, what the Chinese did was they brought in every major city would have a Chinatown. And in the Chinatown, you have what they call Chinese casinos. The Chinese come in there and they play. It's some kind of a dice game. I mean, I've watched it, but had no idea. They're not regular dice. They're like little chips, little chips that they throw back and forth, and they bet big money on it. And the house makes a fortune because the house takes like 2% from every pot, and there's sometimes thousands of dollars in each pot. You know, they're all around the table and they're betting both ways or whatever. But it's a real big money maker. In fact, when they raided the Chicago place, they got over $1 million in cash out of the casino there. What the Chinese do was they were bringing in all these kids from the mainland and bringing them into the U.S. And they brought them in to work the casinos. And what happened over a period of years was some of these kids would be there to guard the casinos and to walk the people from the casino back to their car and whatever. When the kids would get older and they'd want a bigger piece of the pie, what happened in Chicago and the same thing was happening in Boston, these kids would break off, start their own faction, and they would wind up coming in there and they would wind up extorting the restaurants and extorting even the game to keep them from robbing the game. And they would go along with it somewhat. What happened in Chicago, and it was the head of the gang, the opposition gang in Chicago. There were former Ghost Shadow, kids. He had been extorting the businessmen, and he started coming in. Then they wanted more money from these restaurateurs, and that's why they brought Lenny Chow and 3 others in from New York and from Boston to Chicago, and they were basically going to threaten them and tell them, you better not or something's going to happen. They were up on the balcony there at what they call the Chinese Palace at 22nd and Wentworth. From the balcony, they shoot this one guy. He was not supposed to be anywhere around the dice game, and they saw him pull up there, and they saw him get out of the car, and it looked like he was going to come over, towards the place, obviously, to rob him or to do something. They just shot him, and the guy winds up dying. He died about maybe 3 or 4 months afterwards, but they get charged with murder. Just behind his car was a squad car. The policemen were there in the restaurant, having a bite to eat. When I met with Wilson, they had another attorney already in Chicago, and there was an attorney involved, Danny Gotland, an attorney from New York, who at that time would represent their people all around the country. I can represent you. I said, I knew the lawyer that he had here. He was a good friend. He was a friend of mine. Let me get the file on the case. Let me find out what it's all about, and we'll meet again and we'll find out, what we're going to do. So after I get the file and I see what it's all about, I meet him again at the same place, and we're talking about representation. And he said, he said to me, what are you going to charge? and what I told him was, I said, what I can do, I said, if you want a jury trial, it'll be 25,000. And I said, if you want a bench trial, I said, it'll be 100,000. and he said, well, what do you mean? I said, that's what I'm going to charge. I said, because with a jury, and I talked in circles. So my thought again is, if anybody is listening to this, if this guy is wearing a wire, and if anybody's listening to this, they're never going to be able to say that, that I'm telling them we're going to fix the case. I said, I have a pretty good idea on a bench trial, what the outcome would be. I said, with a jury, you'll never know. I said, because I've had a number of cases with a number of these judges and whatever, and I just use a lot of mumble jumble. Anyhow, it's going to be 100,000 for a bench and 25,000 for the jury. And he indicates, we'll take the bench.
Easy decision, right?
He says, we'll take the bench. I says, get me a check for $10,000 and I'll file my appearance. And he says, is it okay if I pay you cash? Is it okay if I pay you cash? And I said, that's not a problem. And that's how I got involved, with this case. And now I go back and I talk with Pat. And I said, I met with these people and I told them, I said, the case was up before Tom Maloney, who I hate and who hates me. And that was a real interesting what happened during that trial. I know he's not going to dare find these guys guilty when Pat's the one that's arranged everything.
But he'd love to dig it into you, right? If he could.
Oh, he tried. That's a story in itself, what I did during that trial.
Well, we'll get into that. But what does Marcy say when you go back to him?
So I said, okay. I said, I'm gonna get 100,000 from him. I said, I've already got 10,000. I said, I'm gonna charge him 100,000. Oh, wow, that's great.
Is that the biggest reaction you've seen on a Marcy ever?
Probably. And then he says, well, what do you want? I'm not gonna do this for no $3,000 this time. I said, we should split it. No, why don't we give you about maybe 10 or 15? And I said, anyhow, we negotiate it down to where I'm going to get 25. They wanted 25 to start with. I got 100. I'm getting 100, and he wants, and he wants to give me like 10. I agree to do it for 10. But I'll tell you the reason why I want to do this case. Number one, I'm thrilled that obviously I'm no longer on the hit list. Although I'm still being somewhat careful. I don't check every morning under my car for bombs and stuff. I realize how powerful these people are. When I'm talking with Wilson Moy and I'm over there, I realize Eddie Chen is one of the most powerful Chinese people here, not just in the country, but around the world. These are big money people. And when he tells me, can we pay you cash rather than the other, I want to get involved with these people. Unbelievable, the cases I got and the money I got from these people and whatever. And what happens too now is Wing is their main enforcer who comes in to work with me. I'm taking him around so he can see what kind of power I've got in the city. He sees it when I'm in front of City Hall. The policemen are stopping me, parking my car. I take him with me to the courthouse and the other places. He sees how people treat me.
Now, what's this individual's name again? Wing
Chin.
So he's an enforcer from New York that comes in.
He travels all around. Whenever there's a murder, whenever somebody winds up getting killed, and it happens a lot because there are all these feuds going. And I got involved in 3 different cases. Wing was a big, powerful Chinese guy who was also apparently, with Kung Fu and all the rest of it. But he was feared all around the country because when he showed up, people knew that, who he was and what his reason was. He was with these people were the Ghost Shadow. The Ghost Shadow, the Only Leong and the Ghost Shadow are the most powerful Chinese Tong all around the world. And Eddie Chan, as I say, was the chairman here. They controlled all the narcotics. They controlled all the commodities. They controlled all this stuff. They're the ones who brought all the people in from the mainland. They smuggled them in here so they could work the card games and the gambling operations, both in Chicago, New York, Houston, New Orleans, Boston. And what got them so enthralled with me, they had been told, I'm sure, by the Alderman and by Wilson. I was part of the mob in Chicago. What happened too now with Wing while he was here, when we finished up with the Lenny Chow case, Wing tells me, they're going to kill us. The opposition gang here, he said, was going to kill us. When I was supposed to go over, I had only gotten 10,000. I was supposed to get the other 90,000 from Wilson over in Chinatown. Because I said to Pat, again, I said, can we trust them for the money? He said, believe me, we'll get the money. Don't worry about it. So all we had was 10,000. When the case was over, and Wing tells me we're sitting there in the courthouse waiting for Maloney to come in to give his decision. And he says if he finds him not guilty, these guys or the other gang is going to kill us. And okay, I don't say anything. When we finish up, I took the kids. I call them the kids because they were young. Lenny Chow himself was only like about 18 years old. I take them out. My car was parked out in front. And I get them in the car, and I take them with me over to the Ambassador East. That's where they were staying. And I call some friends of mine. I call a couple of detectives from the extradition unit, and I tell them, I need a favor. Can you guys come over here? I want to talk to you about something. And so they come over. And I told them, I said, look, somebody supposedly is going to kill these kids. Can you take them take them to the airport and stay with them until they get in the plane to make sure that they get back to New York? Okay, not a problem. I mean, here, Wing is watching this. He checks out of the hotel, and we walk back over to my place, and I got him a gun. We take a ride over to Chinatown. And when we get there had to be about maybe 30, 40 people outside the one restaurant. And Wilson is there. And, oh, wow, great, terrific. And we go back in the place, and he's got an envelope, a big FedEx envelopes. It's full of money, but obviously it's not 100,000, And he says, here's 25,000. He said, and the chairman wants to meet you in New York. He wants you to meet some people. He'd like you to represent us all around the country. And but he said he wants to show you a good time. He's throwing a special, get together, and he's got people from around the country coming in so they can all meet you. So, well, I'm game. And
presumably this is where you'll pick up the rest of the cash.
Yeah, he'll have the rest of the money. I come back to Counselors. I'm going to fly out that same afternoon. I'm going to fly out there. Why not? It's only like about less than a 2-hour plane ride from Midway. I go back and I see Pat. I said, I've got 25,000. I said, I'm supposed to go to New York and pick up the rest. And he says, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to go there. You're not going any place to pick up the money. I says, Pat, I can't embarrass these people. I mean, they want me to go. No. And I said, Pat, I'm going to go. Well, he says, well, okay. He says, but if you go, he says, don't stop at Atlantic City on your way back. Meaning, don't blow the money.
Yeah.
They all know that I'm a big gambler. So I go to New York, and I fly there with Wing, and we fly into the airport. And when we come walking out, here's 3 of these, keep calling them kids because we're real young, and they take my luggage, and we go out, and they've got 2 Mercedeses parked out there in the front, and we get in the car, we drive over to this funeral home. It's over there, I think, on Mott Street, as I remember.
In Soho in New York City, Manhattan.
We walk into this funeral home, and a real old building. It stinks in there because they've got all this food there. They put all this food on the floor. It's for the spirits or something of those that when they die. The place just looks filthy. It looks old and dusty, and it's got these huge. The ceilings are way up there. How high? I don't know exactly, but I mean way up there. We walk towards the back on the right hand side, and we walk into this room. Holy Christ, we walk in there with the high ceilings. And as I look in there, here's Eddie Chan. He's sitting at a desk that's up on like a podium. And he's got, on the one side of him, it turns out he's got a marshal, a U.S. marshal. On the other side, he's got a lieutenant there, a police lieutenant. They're both in plain clothes, but I find out it's a local police lieutenant. And behind him, there had to be 100 pictures in the wall with him shaking hands with presidents and governors and mayors and all kinds of other politicians and all kinds of movie stars, and I sit down in front of him. I'm sitting down, in the lower area in front of him with Wing next to me. And the first thing he says to me, he speaks real broken English, and Wing speaks English and not a whole lot better. He says, I've heard so much about you, because when I was in Chicago, too, with Wing, I wouldn't let him pick up any bills. I picked up all the checks, and I took him into some of these gambling operations that were going on. And you saw when I walk in, everybody knows me, with the interaction with the police and with the restaurants. So everybody paid attention to me. He says, Wing told me, how good you were to him. He said, how much money do you have with you? And now, what? and I had about maybe 5,000 or 6,000 in my pocket. And he says, I want you to give him all your money because we don't want you spending anything. He tells me in broken English, he says, you pick up all the bills. You not pick up any bills here. We pick up all the bills. And they tell me they've got a room for me over at the Vista Hotel, all kinds of things planned for me. Got a dinner for you over at one of the restaurants, and I've got some people I want you to meet. I give them my money. We don't want you even giving tips. We'll do all that. When we leave there and we walk out, the restaurant we're going to is probably about a block and a half, 2 blocks away. As we're walking in the street, all these people are basically bowing, because of him. You've got him with me standing next to him. We got one of the policemen walking, one of them walking in front, one walking behind, and there's Wing. There's a couple of other people, that were over there in the funeral home that came. So as we're walking, everybody is like, all but bowing as we're walking by, and he's nodding at all these different people. And we go into this restaurant, and we go up, and it was the same restaurant where probably about a year later, somebody came in with a machine gun and killed a bunch of people. It was that same place, a huge, huge restaurant. What they had up on the second floor, a curtain that went all the way across the whole room. And they had about 3/4 of it cut off with this curtain. We walk into this huge room. There's one table up on like a podium way at the far end. And all throughout the restaurant, there had to be about 20 of these tables that were spread out. Every seat was taken. When we were brought in, we were sitting up there in the top, and all the people now were already sitting in there as we came in, and they're bringing all kinds of food out. They filled all these waiters bringing out all kinds of food. The tables are all full of food, and I'm talking with Eddie somewhat. Eddie's saying, Wing tells me how good you were, and I can imagine the stories he told, especially when, he says, they're going to kill us. And I just, I got him a gun and off we go. After about 15 minutes, I look up and everybody is watching us. Everybody's looking at us and nobody's eating. And our table, our thing too was, full. And some of them were all sitting there, talking while we're talking. They're all watching us. And I said, how come nobody's eating? Eddie says, because they're waiting for you to eat first. You're the guest of honor. And I look at this table, and there wasn't a single thing that I was going to eat. It was all this fancy vegetable stuff. And no, I've never eaten vegetables. I would not eat vegetables. And all this stuff was this fancy bird nest soup and all the other stuff. But I just said, and I had already been told, you can't embarrass them, by not eating. Well, I'm not going to eat stuff I don't like. What I said to him was, I said, I'm allergic to vegetables. I said, well, what can we get? So I said, well, maybe some fish, eggs, some egg drop soup, and other things, but no vegetables. What he does too now, after we finish up there, he walks me around to every table, and this is our lawyer. From now on, anytime you have a problem, you call me. And when he's talking about his serious problems, like somebody getting killed, you call me and we get him. You can just imagine what kind of a time I had for 3 days there. Everywhere I went, a couple of girls with me. The deal I had with Eddie, he says, anytime I have to talk to you, I'll get you 5,000. What started happening, in fact, it was a short period of time, when I get a call, Wing would call me and he says, Eddie wants to meet with you. So, I fly out there, when I meet him there at the funeral home, first thing he does is, he hands me $5,000 in cash. And then he says, Lenny Chow got arrested again in Boston for murder. And there were 3 others that got arrested with him. We want you to handle the case. And I said, okay. And, I was there only probably about an hour or two. And I flew back home. I make some phone calls. And I talked to some people there. He gave me some information. And they had a lawyer already there in Boston. And I talked to him. And, and he told me what it was all about. The 3 of them, Lenny Chow apparently was I guess it was a drugstore where you walk down the steps to go in there. And he's in there with one of the other guys from the gang. They had a gang that ran the gambling operation there. He was in there, and they get jumped by a bunch of these other kids, who it turns out were the connected group there in Boston. And he winds up stabbing him in the neck with a little pocket knife he had and kills him. The 4 of them are in custody and are charged with murder. I fly out to Boston. I meet with the lawyer who's telling me how important he is. He says, I used to represent, who was this guy? One of the mobsters in New York, somebody who had died like 20 years before. This, I represented him, and he's telling me what a terrific lawyer he is. And I know the judge. I know the judge was on the case, and so forth. I'm just listening to him. But when I meet him there, I smelled alcohol. I got in there, it was around 3-4 o'clock, and I can smell this is one of those drunks. The guy, I smell the alcohol in his breath. And I talked to him about, the bond, we want to get a bond set. There's no bond on him, and we have to try and get a bond set. And he said, I've got a bondsman, he tells me. I've got a bondsman here that will give us the bond when we get the bond set, and we arranged to go the next morning over into the court. So I went over and saw the kids. They were all in custody over there. I went to the jail and I talked with Lenny. It was one of the kids that was involved in Chicago, but the 2 others I didn't know. They were kids from Boston, and we go to court the next morning. When we come in there, it's a big case there. All these people hear about, this lawyer's coming in from Chicago. We get there before court opens up, and I'm talking to a couple of these lawyers in the hall. Hi, how are you? Who are you? And I said, what's the story here? What about bonds and whatever? And they tell me they have a system, a bonding system there. You can go in there and you can have either a bond where you have to use a bondsman where you got to pay him. I think you pay him like 25% or something of whatever the bond is. In Boston, too, you have to be presented to the court by a local attorney or you can't represent them. And the local attorney has to introduce you to the court and say that you are a fit and proper person to be handling something like this. And this lawyer's telling me he knows the judge. He's a personal friend of his. So we go in there for the hearing. The policemen testify. And after they testify, Mopey supposedly cross-examines them. I've got the file there. I've got the reports, and he does a shitty job. He doesn't bring out certain information that could have put some question about the case and whatever. And so when he finishes, I said, I've got a couple questions, and the court says, well, the one attorney already spoke. And I said, I'd already been introduced to the court. I was okay to represent him. And I said, there's a couple of other things that weren't brought out. And so, so I asked some other questions and I cross-examined him. The other lawyer first, goes up there and the judge indicates it's going to be a bond with a bondsman. There were a lot of things I would like to bring out about these boys, and there are some other facts that I saw that were listed in the police file. Okay, what were those? I do the arguing, and I asked for a state bond or whatever, and he grants it. The bond was $100,000. So now I've saved our people, and that was on each one of them. I saved our people about $300,000 in terms of what it would have cost them. And when we walk out, he says, yeah, see, I told you the judge is a friend of mine. And I'm thinking, you piece of shit. When you use a bondsman, I know what the rules are. The lawyers get a good portion of that money kickback, from them. I've decided I'm getting rid of this guy. They reset the case I think it was for like a month, for a preliminary hearing. They called it something else, but it's like a preliminary hearing. I go meet these other lawyers. I'm going to hire 3 of them. There's 3 of them that I agreed to hire. And I'm only giving them $10,000 apiece, which was a lot of money at that time. This is not my money. This is all, the only young money. And I waited about a week, and then I called Mopey back and he said, when are you going to come back so we can get ready for the preliminary? I said to him, you're obviously you're a terrific attorney. I said, I'm going to hire some other lawyers. I said, because, I'm used to being the lead attorney and that might affect you. I'm trying to be nice to this jerk, but I want no part of him. And I've already paid him anyhow. And, I'm going to let him keep that money. He's not real happy about it, but we hang up. And when I go to court, it was like 2 days later, when I come walking into the courthouse, somebody walks up and slaps me with a summons. This guy filed a lawsuit against me, indicating that I promised him $100,000 for the case, and I had only paid him $25,000, and he wanted the other $75,000. And he had gone before the court and filed a petition to have me removed from the case. And the media's there. They're going to have a hearing on it. The hearing is going to be at 1:00. I'm there at 9:00. And anyhow, I'm with the other 3 lawyers now that I've already hired. We're back at their office, and if you want, we'll represent you. I says, no. I said, I'll represent myself, because this guy had already gone in there and indicated that I was a fit and proper person, the rest of it, and I'm not going to go out of it without a fight, because number one, I've already been paid $100,000, and I'm going to wind up charging another $100,000 or so for myself on this case. And again, I'm not going to leave without a fight. We go in there for the hearing, and these people too are telling me this guy, drinks with the judge and the rest of it. And so anyhow, we go in there, and I'm representing myself, and he's got an attorney representing him. And he goes first, and he gets up there. Now the room is full of people, and the media's there. TV trucks out and out in the front of the place, and anyhow, he indicates that it's, I found out or something. He said that this attorney isn't a proper attorney, and because I was relatively young. I mean, I was only probably like in my 30s, in my late 30s, and he gets up there and goes through some bullshit. And when he's through, I cross-examine him, and and I said, well, when I came in, you never asked me anything about my background, did you? I said, when we get finished, it's my turn to get up. I get up there now, and I brag about myself. I've had probably 30 juries, and I've won all but one of them, and on and on I go. And when I get all finished, he gets up. And he asked me a question. And when he does, I says, Your Honor, he has an attorney. He has no standing to be asking me any questions. He goes to Mopey. He's right. Your attorney will cross. He says, but he was able to cross-examine me. Anyhow, the ruling is that I can stay in court. We go to the hearing. When we finish, the hearing lasts about a day and a half. And when we finish with the hearing, what happens is they dismiss two of them, and they held the other 2 over. They held Lenny Chow, and they held the kid that was in the drugstore. But they dismissed the murder charges against the other 2 kids who were back at the apartment when all this happened. So now I'm with Wing back at the hotel, and Wing comes up, and I told you what happened in Chicago. Wing tells me, I just found out these kids know who you are. They know your reputation. And if Lenny Chow, the one who killed him, is found not guilty, they're going to kill us. I said to him, who runs the group? I said, who's the leader of this gang? And he tells me, Harry Mook. And I said, is Harry Mook Chinese or is he Chinese American? And he said, he's Chinese American. I said, where does he hang out? He said, he's got a big restaurant and he's there all the time. And that's where he is. And I says, get me a gun and let's go visit him. What? And I said, look, he's not going to do anything in his restaurant. If he's Chinese American, he's got enough sense that nothing is going to happen in the restaurant. Let me go over and let me talk to him. So we head over to the restaurant. And when we come in there, he's in the back at one of those, again, big round table back in the corner. And we come walking in, and he's a big guy. Here's this guy. He's probably about 200 and some pounds, about maybe 220. And looks like one pretty tough character. And he was relatively young. He was probably, I'd say, in his early 30s. And, when I walked in, these kids started, mumbling because they had been at the court and they recognized me coming in there. I walk up and I said, Harry, I said, Bob Cooley. And, and I go to shake his hand and he shakes my hand. And I says, can you and I have a talk? He tells all these kids to disappear. And I said, listen, I said, Harry, I said, this case is going to go the way it's going to go. I said, you know who these people are. I said, this is Go Shadow. This is the only Young. I said, this is the most powerful tongue in the world. I said, you may have contacts here in Boston. Instead of fighting with these people and competing, why don't you join up with them? They're having a convention in Chicago in about a month. And instead of fighting with these people, I said, why don't you join in with these people? I said, and I'll get you an invite to the convention. So, he said, wow. He said, weren't you a little nervous coming in here? And I said, you're not going to do anything here. Anyhow, we suddenly become instant friends. While we're there talking, he says to me, well, listen, he said, there's somebody maybe you'd like to meet who can maybe help you. And I said, who's that? He said, he basically runs the state. He said, him and his brother basically, run the entire state. And, maybe you'd like to meet with him. I said, sure. So he arranges a lunch the next day. I go with Wing over to this hotel, and who do I meet but Whitey Bulger? Hi, how are you? And in fact, he told me, he said, I had you checked out. He said, and I see that you're the real deal. You had called Chicago. I don't know who he talked to there, but he had contacted somebody in Chicago, and he said, and I realized that, you can be trusted. And he said, among other things, he said, yeah, my brother he told me his title, but he said that, we have control over basically the police here. He said, and if you want, I'll introduce you to the police and you can start making payoffs and they'll stop raiding your games and the rest of it. And I just told him, I said, look, I don't want to talk to him. I said, but you can introduce Wing here. So, that's what happens now. The trial was set for about 6 weeks after that. And now I get a call from Wing and he says, Eddie wants to talk to you. Again, there's a quick 5,000. So I fly out to see Eddie and he says, we want to hire another lawyer there because, he knows the judge or whatever. Whitey apparently is convincing him that they've got some guy and we want to hire him. We want you to hire him too. And he can fix the case. And I just told him, no, if you've got somebody else and if he can fix the case, that's fine. I said, then I'm out of it. And he said, no. Lenny wants you. I said, no, I don't want him. And I'm not going to deal with somebody I don't know. I'm going to take the case to a jury. If you want a bench trial and you want to do it that way, so be it. I said, but I'm not going to represent Lenny anymore. The case isn't ready to go for about another 3 or 4 weeks, and I fly back home. He gives me 5,000. I take it and tell him to drop dead, and I fly back home. And I get a call then again from Wing a couple of days later, and he says, please. He said, Lenny Chow wants you as the attorney, and we want you to come in. And I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. I get a call again about a week later. Wing, says, I want to come to Chicago to talk to you. So he flew into Chicago. In fact, he came in with a girlfriend. And after dinner, he says, well, look, he said, whatever you want. He said, Eddie told me that, he'll pay you whatever you want, but he'd like you to come back and work with them. I said, I told you no before, and I'm telling you no now. I'm not going to deal with any strangers. That was the end of my business with the Leon. I just wouldn't do it.
The Chicago mob didn't have a direct influence on the Chinese mob, but
they were terrified of them.
But here's a question I have. Do you know if the Chinese government was at all involved with the Chinese mob here? Were you ever privy to anything?
Well, yeah, oh yes. That's another story. Prior to this, I was their guy. I was God to these people.
And now we're talking like the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, it was in the early 80s. Shortly after that, and before that case went to trial, that's when I brought Harry Mook, to meet these people. And now he's connected with all them, and they're connected now with Whitey Bulger and company that basically control the whole Boston area.
I see that he passed away in 2020 at the age of 85.
Why would they have his name someplace? Oh, they just showed that he was the leader of the gang there.
Well, there's no mention of him in a gang, but there's a mention of him as some business tycoon in Boston, Chinatown, and a restaurant owner. And it's very. There's no mention or relationship to organized crime, but there's a lot of tributes to him as this avuncular businessman who helped people in the community.
I told you, he wasn't more than a couple of years older than me when I met him. At that time, I was in my late 30s.
Was there a direct link that you saw between the Chinese government and these Chinese mobsters?
This particular time was when they announced that they were going to be allowed to do business. That's why we were getting involved in this. Prior to that, they were not allowed to do any business. China could not do any business with Hong Kong. The only Young was the Chinese mafia. Look up the Ghost Shadow. The Ghost Shadow, that's the Chinese mob. That's the organized crime. The one interesting about the Chinese too, even with the Ghost Shadow and the rest of it, they did nothing basically with the Americans. And you remember when I told you when we're walking down the street and these people are all bowing and whatever. I know the reason why now, because they were all being extorted. Every single one of those businesses there in Chinatown was paying a street tax.
You're talking about in New York.
In New York.
Yeah. Here's the Ghost Shadows, or GSS. Again, this is Wikipedia. Was a Chinese-American street gang that was prominent in New York City's Chinatown from the early 70s to the mid-90s, formed in 1971 by immigrants from Taiwan and Hong Kong. The gang is affiliated with the An Leong Tong. Seems like the gang does not exist anymore. They were actually brought down by Giuliani via federal RICO crackdowns.
Yes, that was the case. When I was working with the feds, that's when that big indictment came down, where they indicted a whole bunch of people.
Wing Yong Chan was president.
And yes, Wing was indicted, but so was they had a warrant for Eddie Chan. They had a warrant for him. He was warned and he left, and he lived in Taipei. I was invited to a convention, and I went to Hong Kong. And the reason what they wanted me to do was they wanted me to convince him it was safe to come back because they felt he believed me. But he had been warned by one of his contacts when the indictment was going to come down, and he fled and went to Taipei. When I went there, Eddie had been so good to me that I made no attempt to get him to come back. I just had a good time. I just went there and partied.
When you were working for these various factions of the American Chinese mafia, was the Chicago outfit, was Marcy trying to get a street tax from you?
No, I never. I never told them anything about any of these others because I know how they are. And that was, if they had found out, there's no question they would have probably said something and I would have paid. I would have, but I had broken away anyhow, before they gave me that case, I had broken away. I never talked to Pat for years until he contacted me, on the Mike Colabo's case. I'd be in counselors a lot walking through there and spent a lot of time with George and those people. But I would just say hi and goodbye. I had no reason to, I wanted nothing to do with these people.
It's interesting. I tried to do a little bit of digging on these guys other than Mook, who's passed away at 85. But the rest of them seem to have gone to jail for a short period of time and maybe are out and about, or it doesn't say. It's kind of
the Chinese, you mean?
Yeah, Wing seems to have gone to jail for 10 years. There's an article here in the New York Post about his children getting into some trouble, but this is 2003.
I testified in that trial. In fact, the only ones convicted, they raided the Chinese place over there in Wentworth. They had an indictment where they indicted about 20 people.
We're going to stop there. That's the conclusion of Conversation 11. Stay with us so you know when Conversation 12 drops. There's much more to come. Thanks again. Please follow us, stay connected, and spread the word.